Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. And thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about an issue that's becoming increasingly contentious. It's about the use of juries in trials. Should juries be used? How should they be used? Under what circumstances should they be used? Are they a benefit to furthering justice or a hindrance to it? And so on. So these are some of the things that I'd like to talk about here and explore this whole sort of discussion a little bit more widely than certainly I've seen in the media. Now, I guess we need to understand when juries first came out or were first sort of introduced. The idea was that people didn't really move around at the time. So if you're born in a village or a town, you pretty much lived there, and even traveling 5 miles out from the town centre or the village centre, that was sort of a rarity. So you grew up with people, you lived with the same people all your life, and you'd be judged by a jury of your peers, most of those people who would know you or know your relatives or something like that. And you'd be judged by those people. And the judge would be often from among you as well, among the community. So it was a way of preventing, say, a magistrate or a government official from engaging in some sort of tyranny and terrorising or victimising a particular individual, because they'd have to get past the jury. Only the jury could decide. Now, the jury, depending on the nature of the punishment, if it was imprisonment or if it was, for example, capital punishment, being hung or having your head chopped off or something like that, then that was meant to be a jury that was supposed to make that decision. And that was the original concept. You'd be judged by a jury of your peers, so the people from the same town or the village. Now, this is, of course, changed. People travel around, they move around. We're looking, say, in the case of the January 6th, you're looking at people from all over the United States being dragged in front of a jury of people from Washington or District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., and it wouldn't be hard to put together a very activist, very anti-Trump jury and so on there. Now, this is a departure from how it was perceived that the juries would originally work. So they're judging, a jury is sitting in judgment of someone they don't know and know nothing about. So a prosecuting works there, well, they voted for Trump, they're Nazis. We got to put those damn Nazis in prison. Nazis, insurrectionists, far right. And so the very leftist jury that voted like 90% for Biden, how those people could be tried in Washington is quite beyond me. If a fair trial was to be, in almost any other jurisdiction in the country, they'd have been acquitted. But there they get charged and imprisoned and so on, and the jury aids and abets that. In my view, that gross breach of justice and a fair trial and so on. So this is something that how do you apply a jury and where do you apply it? Should you only apply a jury where the in the local area of somebody of the town or the village where the person lives, and should people who know them be there? Should their relatives or third cousins be there? Is that a conflict of interest? If it's only based on the facts and the evidence, then a jury should make a decision purely based on that and not on any ideology. Now, I've looked at a number of the things, like photographs of juries in the United States. Now, one thing that sort of has come across, certainly in the pictures I've seen, that 60% of the jury members are non-white. Now, in these juries, here's a 12-person jury, five black people, 1 Indian, 1 Chinese, 5 white people. Now I don't know how can that be so? If black people only make up 12 or 13% of the population, how is it they end up taking 40 to 50% of the jury positions? I don't follow that. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me. Why is it that a black person is the jury foreman in so many of these situations? That or a minority person, it could be a white lesbian or whatever, but why is a minority ending up as the jury foreman? How does that even work? So now the use of activist juries, particularly in the case of the United States, we get a grand jury. The use of activist juries is something that is they seem to be able to put together an activist jury with no trouble at all. How is it that the defense attorney is accepting these activists in the jury? I don't understand. But why would you accept activists into the jury? Maybe there are only activists to pick from, so the defense attorney, because I think you only get three rejections or a certain number of rejections. You can't just keep on rejecting endlessly. So maybe the whole pool of potential jury candidates is they're all activists, and because of that, no matter what you do, no matter which ones you reject, you're still going to get activists only in the jury. Because cases, say in the January 6th cases that were, in my view, blatantly, the guy was nowhere near the building at the time, or was even on the outskirts of Washington, and how it can be argued that this person was an insurrectionist it's impossible, and yet somehow these activist juries are coming back with guilty verdicts. So we have to accept that putting together an activist jury is not a problem for activist prosecutors and activist judges. Now, I've seen activist judges sort of at work, and even though they have a jury, that the judge will disallow evidence that exonerates the accused. So no, we're not accepting that evidence. You can't have it. That's it. And is accepting very low-level circumstantial evidence from the prosecutors. And so they sort of massage a guilty verdict into a gullible, dumbass jury. Now, if I saw that as a member of a jury, I'd be outraged. I would see that straight away. That's an activist judge trying to subvert the law, and I would instantly be opposed to it. But not all juries are. Now, it could be they don't want a deadlock jury where they stay in there for days. People have got families to get back to, or they've got jobs to go to, and things to, they don't want to stay in there all day endlessly. So if rather than hold out for justice, say, hey buddy, I'm busy. If they want to have a guilty verdict for that innocent guy, who cares? So there can be those sorts of things as well, just day-to-day practical life issues for jury members. Now, some of the arguments for getting rid of juries are, some of them are reasonably valid. Say in the case of forensic accounting, so very, very micro-detailed discussion of financial transactions and whether tight definitions of the tax codes were breached, or whether funds were misused in some way, or there was some sort of financial malfeasance, again under very strict interpretations and technical definitions and interpretations of the law. That's going to be beyond most. Very few people will be able to follow that. And I knew an accountant. He was the chief accountant in the company I was working in. He got jury duty, and it turned out to be a financial malfeasance type case. And he was going to say, no one in the room even understood word one of what was going on. And they all just said, look, we don't understand it. You're an accountant, you decide. And so really, and he was the foreman of the jury as well, and he decided and he decided that, and then everyone just threw their hands up. No, don't understand it. So in a case like that, is a jury, can you say we're only going to constitute a jury of accountants or something like that, or do you say, well, only the judge can understand it? Now, I've spoken to senior lawyers, and they've talked very disparagingly about certain judges and magistrates and so on. And there was one case that where I was going to be a witness, but it ended up not going ahead. And these lawyers, top drawer lawyers here, they were multi-gazillionaire type stakes here, and they were just openly talking about there was only one or two judges who had the intellectual capacity to understand the intricacies of the case, and that's the judges, for goodness sakes. But the argument is, can we really use juries in super complicated, detailed, transactional, complicated cases? Because the jury wouldn't understand it. So why put the thing, why put a legal case through that? Because the jury at the end of the day will be deciding, like, do I like the guy? He seems like he's got an honest face, or a dishonest face, as the case may be. And they'll make the decision based on some sort of half-assed emotional bullshit, rather than understanding the detailed intricacies of the case and of the evidence that's being put forward and cross-examined. So the argument there to say, well, only a judge should hear the case, that actually does have merit there. Or can you constitute a so-called professional jury? And if you do, should it be 12 people or 10 or something? Should it be like 3 or 5? Should they be paid for being there, given that in effect you're not just getting their public service or their duty to public service, you're actually getting their expertise, because it's their expertise that will be used or employed in order to determine the validity of the evidence or lack of validity. So I would say there's an argument to be had there. Most of the most of the arguments around getting rid of juries, or using juries even, around various forms of ideological activism. And that's really the danger, I think, that we're in, or not I think we are in now, all across the Western world, because you have this restorative justice, compensatory justice, social justice activism, and so on, that's infected now the entire legal system. Activist judges, activist prosecutors, activist district attorneys, activist lawyers, activist members on the jury panel, on the jury, and so on. So it's shot through with activism. The media's gone hysterical. I mean, how could somebody get a fair trial in about the January 6th stuff when all the media reporting, certainly in Washington and District of Columbia and so on, all the media reporting was aggressively against Trump and the protesters, and was putting out the most outrageous lies and misinformation about them. And I think it would have been near impossible to get a fair trial there, particularly in an area that was, again, votes 90% Democrat pretty much all the time. So coming to the activism side of it, there's a big push to get rid of juries. This is across the Western world in, say, rape trials, as a case in point. Now, I just want to stress, and I've mentioned this in other videos, that much to my surprise, talking to a judge recently, 20 years ago, the cases the judge used to hear were things like murder and armed robbery and that sort of stuff. And today, the majority of cases, by far and away, the majority of cases the judge hears, and this is quite a senior judge, is rape cases, and technical rape. Not he tied her up and used a gun or something like that, or held a gun to her. Not that, but technical rape. She had one glass of wine too many, which meant technically she couldn't give, and he said, she said, this sort of stuff where the case even getting to court's a surprise, because the case is being brought when there's minimal evidence. It's just there's no DNA evidence. There's nothing. There's just a he said, she said case, and arguing. And each case is an argument on technicality of, technically she gave consent, but technically that consent wasn't valid. Therefore, they can claim rape. So they're really bringing these cases, the activists, the prosecutors are bringing these cases to court. They shouldn't be in court. The judges don't want to throw them out because they don't want to appear like they're going, they're not pro-feminist. So the judges are hearing these cases, which go for days, costing the taxpayer a fucking fortune, by the way. So these cases are coming to court, and because they swing on micro technicalities, and could drop either way. But if it dropped, the micro technicality drops either way, then the penalties are the equivalent to if the guy did pull out a gun and tie her up and do this and do that. And so the fact that a micro technicality was used to nail the guy doesn't affect the sentence. The sentencing is still you get 15 or 20 years because you did or didn't do it, rather than you were nailed on some micro technicality. Now, with these weak cases coming to court, and they're coming to court in an avalanche, with these weak, and because it's activist prosecutors and so on, because we all know that all women are being raped all the time by these fucking Nazis. So we have to get them. We've got to bring this to court. We've got to nail those evil Nazi, fascist, far right, straight white male motherfuckers. So they're bringing these cases, these weak cases to court, but very few of them are getting up, for obvious reasons. And this has outraged the feminist sort of class and their supporters. And they've got very powerful lobby groups into the body politic. And this is a great way to divide Western society by gender. So the globalists are all behind it. And there's a lot of NGOs, very well funded NGOs, that love this because it pushes, you've got the race hustle and grift on one side, then the gender hustle and grift on the other. Great way to destroy society, neutralize straight white males, make society dysfunctional. So it's perfect for that, tailor-made. So they push this rape thing very hard as a great sort of gender division type grift. Now the radical feminists are arguing with more and more support by the day, it seems, that in order to increase the prosecution rate, well, because they're arguing that because the prosecution rate is quite low, that therefore there must be something wrong. The prosecution rate should be 100%. The fact that it's so low means that there must be bias, there must be prejudice, there must be misogyny, there must be fascist Nazis. So let's do away with the juries, because juries are very reluctant to convict. Why are they reluctant to convict? Because it's down to a he said, she said, and a technical, but did you have another mouthful of wine? Because if she had one more mouthful of wine, then she can't consent. Therefore, it's rape. And not surprisingly, people with even the tiniest bit of common sense or reasonableness won't convict someone on that basis. The feminists want to convict because they just want the straight white boy scalp. They don't really care if he did it or not, because we all know they're misogynist Nazis anyway. Who cares if the guy did or didn't do it? It doesn't fucking matter. So there, to the feminists and the globalists, this is an ideological confrontation. This is where the ideology of reshaping society meets those that don't think society should be reshaped, and it's that ideological clash. And the radical feminists and the globalists aren't winning it, so they just want to change the rules to make sure they can win it and win it all the time. Now, if you've got rid of the jury and you've got an activist judge, an activist prosecutor, and the lawyer who's defending the guy is dependent on his income for being in the good graces of these same people, he's not going to live in that nice place anymore and drive that nice BMW anymore. If he falls foul of these people, he knows he has to sell his client out. He's charging his client shitloads of fucking money, but he knows he has to sell his client out. Otherwise, he can't. He's not going to have that night. He may never work again. And there's been quite little whispers that he's maybe in line to become a judge himself. But if he makes the wrong decision on this case, well, his name will drop to the bottom of the list. There's all this sort of noise going on in background, and he realizes that he can't really vigorously defend his client. He can't present it. He can spot evidence to say, gee, if I put this evidence forward, there's no way my client can be convicted. But they want a conviction. Everybody wants it. The prosecutor wants it. The judge wants it. The Department of Justice wants it. The media wants. Everybody wants this guy to be guilty. So I just won't put forward that evidence, that is exculpatory evidence that would get him. I just won't put that. I just won't say anything. And if the guy gets convicted, well, it's not really my fault. I mean, I didn't convict him. I'm not the judge. and I'll still get a really big juicy gig tomorrow if I do the right thing. But if I vigorously defend my client and he wins the case and gets off on this, then I'll maybe be out of work, or I'll never get that juicy gig, or I'll never get that judgeship, or so on. So these things are all going. So once you get rid of the jury, that's the last barrier, protection against injustice. Because these activist judges and so on, I mean, you don't get told that the judge is an activist. You're a guy, you just come into the court and you think, well, that's an independent judge, and hey, they'll rely on the evidence. No. These are activists. They've come through the system of, all women are oppressed, all men are oppressed, straight white men are all Nazis, and so on and so forth. So only by putting fuckloads of straight white men in prison on technicalities of rape can we restore social justice and equity and it's the only way we can stamp out misogyny. Misogyny is everywhere. Hitler is everywhere. This is the only way we can stop Hitler. And they have this view, and so juries just get in the way. Now the last thing I mentioned about juries is there have been a number of cases in the United States, but also elsewhere in Britain and so on, where black people accused of murder, very violent, premeditated murder and so on, haven't been convicted, or they've been convicted on a much lesser charge. For example, they bunch of black kids, beat a man to death, then a white man to death, then and then I don't know, steal his wallet or something. Then they'll end up being on a charge of assault with theft, and not the murder, or not the assault. And so instead of getting 15 or 20 years in prison, they're getting, a year in prison and a couple of years probation, this sort of thing. And the juries are refusing to convict. Again, the judge is likely to be an activist, but if the combination again of the prosecutor, the whole legal system is on compensatory justice, restorative justice. Do you know that person's great grandfather was a slave? So we have to we look to restore justice. We have to let them off. It's compensatory in the overall scheme. We have to understand why they're so angry, and it's because of the oppression they've suffered at the hands of the Nazis. And so by letting them off from this murder, we're restoring justice. It is a restoration of justice, not a departure from it. And juries are, in the areas where, in fact, in any area, if they put enough black people on the jury, they can pretty much reliably be sure that the jury will be deadlocked or will produce a not guilty verdict. So the use of juries here and the selection of jury members is done, and this was done in the January 6th juries, is done for also the juries, the grand juries, to go and chase after Trump, the same sort of thing. The juries are stacked with activists that will produce an outcome consistent with the activist prosecutors and activist district attorneys and so on. And juries are being perverted there specifically to prevent justice being done and to deliver a particular outcome that the ideologues want. So we're looking at the justice system has been perverted, sort of up, down, left, right, cross, oblique angles. It's just been corrupted and perverted, I think, at every level here, and it's used quite cynically to produce ideological outcomes. And I don't see anybody pushing back on this. A few commentators here and there, but the reporting the media, the mainstream media does on this, even presents it as being it's a just outcome if the black murderer gets let off, but it's an evil, terrible outcome if the straight white guy used a hurty wordy against the transgender lesbian, then The fact he didn't go to prison for 100 years, that's an outrage. That's a miscarriage of justice of grand proportion. So again, we see everything is being framed ideologically rather than based on the facts. And if you look at courts where, say the divorce courts, for example, where the entire edifice of the divorce court system is shot through from top to bottom, and there's no one there who isn't a fucking activist, for goodness sakes, and they're allowed to apply their ideology with utter impunity. And we see that the outcomes there are so heavily one way that we'll see that in any court that is given over to ideology. And if juries are removed from those courts, rape courts as an example, then we'll see a huge increase in the conviction rate, but only because of ideological activism, not because the facts have changed or the veracity of the cases or the allegations have changed. And but the impetus for this is all ideological. It's nothing to do with justice or facts or so on. And when you look at the sort of training that the legal kids are getting, going through law schools now, and have been for quite some years, is that the facts and evidence and so on don't take into account compensatory justice, social justice, and restorative justice. Therefore, facts and evidence really have no validity. They're just things that are created by evil white fascist Nazis. And the sooner we get rid of them, the better, according to these people. And having an activist judges make a decision of, well, you're a straight white guy, prison for you, motherfucker, then that is justice in their view. And that's how far we've sunk or gone down the sinkhole in the West. You've been a fantastic today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.